What's up, folks? We're going to do another real quick faction breakdown and review, and this time we're going to go ahead and talk about Separatists. Turns out I'm a total sucker for an underdog, and Scum is actually on the upswing, and we'll talk more about that later. But we just looked at the Las Vegas Open, the LVO results for this year, and there were, unless I'm very much mistaken, 0 Separatist lists at that tournament. And there are Separatist players out there who love the faction and love to play it. There's definitely something there, and I do feel like it may be being slept on a little bit. So we're going to do a super quick whirlwind review of the faction. Doesn't have anywhere near the ship options that Scum does, so I won't have as much to talk about here. And I'm just going to do this really quick and kind of stream of consciousness. I'm also not going to talk too much about individual builds. I'm going to do a quick highlight of each individual ship, some of the iconic pilots, not all that many, and then we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the unique upgrades that really stand out. So we'll jump straight through here. First of all, I started with the Vulture, which is the bottom of the list, but it's such an iconic piece of the faction, I wanted to go ahead and start with it. This is that little dinky droid, the robot ship over here. And I'm using this in Launch Bay next, just because I think visually it's more appealing, even though I think Yasby is better on the website, but I do really like the Launch Bay app. Highly recommend. Okay, so just looking at this, the Vulture it's got 2s across the board, so it's got 3 hull, but it's got 2 attack dice, 2 evade. Yeah, it's a Z95 with no shields, which makes it incredibly fragile. The counterpoint to that, the reason it stands out a little bit, is because there are a lot of them that are 2 points. A lot of them that are 2 points. You can run, I believe you can do an 8-ship list where every single one is a unique pilot. And now I chose to put the Precise Hunter on here because nothing will ever redeem the poor Precise Hunter. It's too expensive. It's got a built-in Predator-ish, but it's a 3-point vulture, so you'll never get to use that, even if it has the loadout and a cannon slot. Well, I do like the cannon slot, and the cannon does benefit from the ability. And it's got 8 loadouts. You can run 3 of these with HLC because 3 pipped, and that's 9 points. It's not good, but it's there. But one of the iconic abilities of these is they only have 3 hull and 2 evade dice, right? That is awful. But they have the ability of network calculations, which anyone who flies Separatists will know. But that is while you defend or perform an attack, you may spend 1 calculate token from a friendly ship at range 0 to 1 to change 1 eyeball to an evade or hit result. So they have offensive and defensive benefits of traveling together and having a lot of tokens. So there are different upgrades you can take that will give your squad more tokens, and that's ways to make them actually scarily durable for having 3 hit points. Now, the big thing that's holding the faction back is that vultures they have 3 hit points. I just talked about one of the things that gives them extra durability. But we've seen ship counts, so list sizes have just gone up, and so you see a lot more ships on the table than before, so that defensive ability has diminishing returns, because they will still melt to enough shots. The other downside is they're almost exclusively low initiative, so they tend to shoot last. So they're deliberately weak because you can take so many of them for cheap. But yeah, there's some stuff there. One of the key things I wanted to highlight too is they usually have grappling struts, which are an upgrade that they can use to just land on a rock and stop, and then sit there and pivot on the rock. They can get the defensive bonus from obstruction when being shot at, and can hang out on objectives or just kind of block up lanes. So that was one of the things that made them a bit of a menace in some of the last edition, or in 2.0 when they were released, that really has sort of fallen short now because objectives are a little bit more dynamic. It's a little bit harder to camp on them. But really the biggest thing has been that increased list sizes has made them less durable. That said, as a filler, you can do 4 of these things for 8 points. So you could have a 12-point list with whatever burly ships you wanted, and then 4 of these guys as fillers, 2 run objectives, 2 take pot shots. And I do think that depending on what the rest of your list is, there is something there. And we'll come back to that when we talk about the unique upgrades. Next up, we've got the Belbelub, the Bulbasaur, Belly Rub, whatever it is. This weird-looking thing that I've never really liked, but it's an interesting ship, right? So it's got 3 attack dice base, which is good, 2 evade, 3 shield, or 3 hull and 2 shields. It's an X-wing. The dial's a bit of a problem, though. Yeah, there we go. So the dial's a little bit iffy where it's fast, but it isn't terribly maneuverable. The only turnaround move it has is those 2 sloops, that 3 sloop, the 3-band sloop, and then they're red, of course. It's got boost to focus, barrel roll to focus, so it has a lot of those AC actions where it has a linked action off of both barrel roll and boost, which is great. Then target lock eyeball, and they tend to have a fair amount of initiative, or a fair amount of loadout. And Grievous is a sneaky little bugger who does better when he's not being shot at. So while you perform an attack, if you're not in the defender's firing arc, you may reroll up to 2 attack dice. This was a staple of the Separatists for a long time. I do think that 5 points is too much for him, and especially with that loadout of 11, so he's kind of fallen by the wayside. But there's still a place for this ship, and there are some other pilots we can touch on too. The one that I always want to use is Captain Sear. He's my personal favorite because he gives every single ship in your list a built-in crack shot, which is super good. They have to have a calculate on hand, which they will probably spend on defense. But just that is an incredibly powerful ability I would love to see make work, but it's probably not worth 5 points in a squad, even with the number of 2-point ships you can throw there. But we'll continue. Next up, we have the Tri-Fighter. 3s across the board, 3 attack, 3 agility, 3 hull. It's a TIE interceptor, and they have weird abilities. And they have, ooh, no, hang on, I got to pick the wrong one. Let's pick one of the more kind of standard ones. And that's Siege of Coruscant. They've also got kind of a weird, yeah, there we go. Okay, so they also have network calculations where they can share calculates with any other ship that has network calculations. So you could screen these with vultures and they can trade each other's calculates. So it's another powerful ability and an ability that you would really, really want on a lot of the AC ships, but it never quite balanced out because it's not as powerful as having a focus, which most true aces have focuses and have ways to get focuses. This is a fun one. He has a longer range and or not specifically network calculations ability where you can spend calculate tokens from friendly ships in the attack arc regardless of range, but they have to be in the attack arc and have calculate tokens. So it's an interesting piece. But yeah, the big one here is going to be Volan Das. He's the initiative 5, kind of a weird one who has more loadout with 12, which is excellent. So you can just give him outmaneuver and call it a day. And also, after you fully execute a red maneuver, you may choose an enemy ship at range 1. The chosen ship gains 1 strain token, and you may remove 1 stress token, which is bananas good on an ace. That this thing can get behind somebody, remove a stress, and then strain the target it's going to hit, and still have the 12 loadout. It's really good. You combo that with outmaneuver, and suddenly you're reducing that target ship's agility by 2. Real good. And then has a different dial, so it's got easier turns and more difficult, no, easier banks and more difficult turns, which just makes it kind of a strange ship. So that dial is actually not correct. So you've got white, white, red for your hard turns, and then blue and blue for your banks, because Volan Das is a human pilot as opposed to the droid that usually flies it. This is an interesting one. They're 4 points. I don't believe any of them are under. There are some 3 points. So there are a couple 3 points of these, which again, you can really fill the board with ships in Separatists like nobody else. They do this better than Empire because they are named, they have crazy abilities. You can do a lot with these 3-point ships. Yeah, and they do have standardized loadouts. They have some standardized loadouts from the Siege of Coruscant. That's true of several of these chassis, and there's some interesting stuff you can do with that. But most of them trade out for some other kind of ability, where this gives DIS 347 afterburners. That's a 10-point upgrade that this thing gets for free? 8-point upgrade. And then marksmanship, and then contingency protocol, which gives a bonus. Yeah, so allows any other ship with contingency protocol to do an action after a friendly ship is destroyed, which gives you a little bit more of a bonus to flying multiples of these. So you can do a heavy Siege of Coruscant list, and really kind of, it's an interesting way to go. We'll talk more about that later, but the durability is a problem. Same reason with the vultures. They are fairly expensive for only having 3 hull, but they do have the 3 evade, and they have defensive abilities built into the chassis before the loadout. So they haven't seen a ton of success, but they're definitely a powerful piece. It's just hard to figure out where it goes. Next up, we have the Fire Spray, most known for Scum, but Jango Fett is arguably the best Fire Spray in the game because he has 8 points, and he has initiative 6, and he has 22 loadout, which I believe is actually higher than Boba's. Yes, 4 higher than Boba Fett and Scum. Doesn't have access to the Scum-specific stuff, but does do quite a bit. And then his ability, while you defend or perform a primary attack, if the difficulty of your revealed maneuver is less than that of the enemy ships, you may change one of the enemy ship's eyeball results to a blank, which is terrific against Jedi. Because anything with Force can modify eyeball results, right? So if you're just changing that to a blank, suddenly it can't use even the Force on that. It's also very good against anything that wants to modify focus results, but particularly good against Jedi, who can always mod that even if they don't have a token. Now there is the problem though, is that means you want to do white maneuvers and that's a gamble, or you do blue maneuvers and you're incredibly predictable, but make it more likely that your ability is going to trigger. But if you do a blue, your opponent does a blue, that ability is blank. So ups and downs, and that's kind of why he's 8 points instead of the 9 that we see for Boba Fett, although Boba Fett should probably be cheaper too. But he's a really interesting piece that can fill out a list. And again, like I said, you have 12 points to spend and can still take 3 to 4 vultures. So you can really like throw this guy in there and then fill the board with scary extra threats to kind of screen him, and you've got quite a bit to work with there. We're going to go ahead and keep on zooming on because there's quite a bit to talk about. Next up, we have the Gauntlet, which came out in every single faction except First Order and Resistance. Really interesting piece. I do think that Pre Vizsla is one of the better Gauntlet pilots because he's a built-in option to roll an additional attack die. He's only initiative 3, so there's a good chance you can pick out targets that are initiative 4 or higher. So you can spend 2 charges, so every other turn, to get an extra attack die. So he's throwing 4 to 5 dice instead of 3 to 4. That being at range 1 with the range bonus. So that is just, he just does it. And then whatever else you throw in that ship is gravy. So that's very good. Still has 14 loadout, which is pretty good for a Gauntlet, and still is just great stats. And it is one of the 2 large base ships available to Separatists. So that is one I definitely have been putting in a bunch of lists. Because at 6 points, a ship with 2 evade and a bunch of hit points that is throwing 4 dice is pretty good. He also is Mandalorian, so he has access to the Mandalorian upgrades, which makes him a very interesting piece to build around. Next up, we have the Roomba, or the actually HMP gunship. This thing here, great character in a lot of the cartoon shows. Really a character, a really good like Doom robot. Definitely reminiscent of Terminator with this thing hovering around the battlefield and shooting at stuff. Also, really interesting piece on the tabletop because it is the first ship that introduced side slips, and all of the HMPs can side slip, which is wild. And they also have pretty cool abilities and loadout, and they're one of the best ships you can bring because they're fairly cheap, and they have the relay slot. Some of them do. You can take the tactical relay, which lets you do some of the unique upgrade stuff that we'll touch on a little bit later. Yeah, and they recently were dropped from 4 points to 3. There are 2 of them that are 3 points, which makes them very, very tempting takes because unlike most of Separatists, they have a bunch of hit points. They trade that for having the offensive capacity of a wet noodle, but they can take upgrades to make that better. Notably on this one has 2 missile slots that you can spend quite a bit on. Moving right along, we have the Hyena, which is just the big brother of the Vulture. It has 2 pods, clearly bigger. Also comes with network calculations, but then also has 5 hit points instead of the requisite 3, and then as a slightly different dial. So you can see that as the Talon rolls and the K-turn instead of some, well, actually, I think the Vulture is very similar. So the dials are similar, sorry. I was thinking something else. Has the reload action notably, and also has the barrel roll to target lock, which is really powerful, especially in combination with network calculations, because if you have a couple of these together, you can take the lock and then spend calculates from your friendly ships. And this one in particular, DBS 404, I really enjoy because it's the error message. If you roll an attack at range 1, you must roll an additional die. After the attack hit, suffer 1 critical damage. So at range 1, he's throwing 4 dice, and if you bring a munition, such as advanced proton torpedoes, it is 6 dice, which is great. And now you take a crit back, but I mean, if you had the lock, you got some calculates from some buddies, it's a devastating hit, but it is, you know, is it worth it? Question mark. I really enjoy him. Next up, and we're very close here, if you're still with me, you are an absolute trooper. We have Sunfac, or the Nantex, what is this thing? What's the ship title called? It's the Nantex something. Nantex class starfighter. All right, that wasn't worth looking up. Anyway, this is a weird thing where it has a primary 3 bullseye gun, then a 2-die turret, 3 evade, and 4 hull. So pretty standard A stats. Sunfac also is initiative 6. But the ability is super strange. So it's while you perform an, Sunfac's ability is while you perform a primary attack, if the defender is tractored, roll 1 additional attack die. So he likes picking on things when they're down. Also, he's an initiative 6 ace that has an opportunity to throw a 3-die attack at 5 points. Seems really, really good. Every time I was list building around this guy, I was like, he's 6 points, is he worth it? And then I'd always look and be like, wait, he's 5. You can run this guy in a 7-ship list. I think you could possibly even run him in an 8-ship list, if I'm not mistaken about the points. Yeah, he's still very squishy with only the 4 hull, and his ability is to tractor himself. You can't rotate your turret to your rear arc, and you also don't have the turret rotate action. So you Do not. You only have the focus and evade actions on this ship. The only way you can rotate your turret is to tractor yourself. Now, the advantage, though, is if you gain a tractor token, you can then act as if you were tractored, where you can barrel roll or boost yourself, and then also you can choose to rotate your ship, since that has been changed. And then this also has a kind of critical upgrade that's stapled to it, which is Ensnare. And Ensnare reads, at the end of the activation phase, if you are tractored, which you would do to rotate your arc, you may choose one ship in your turret arc at range 0 to 1, transfer one tractor token to it. So no defense, you can't get out of it. If you're in range of this in the right arc, you will just be tractored. And then the Nantex player can choose to move you, and if they do with the current tractor rules, you could rotate your ship. But if they don't choose to move you, then you're just sitting there tractored for everyone else to shoot at you. And of course, you could only be moved based on base size. If you're a small base, you get the single token, you can be moved. Otherwise, it would take more than that. But then you also trigger Sunfac's ability. So if he's at range 1, tractored himself to get up close, has you on the arc, he'll just drop a tractor token on you, and he's throwing 4 dice out of that turret arc, and you will be rolling 1 fewer defense dice. He's really, really, really powerful, and again is initiative 6, so you get the best possible world out of this. Also suffers, like many of the Separatist ships, for being in a meta where ship counts are generally higher. Now, that was more of an issue earlier on. We are seeing more smaller lists kind of crop up, but then there are still so many lists out there that run 5 or 6 ships. It's extremely risky to run an ace like this without a whole lot of screening or ways to keep him alive. I do still, though, Sunfac is one of the first ships that I reach out to because we're seeing a lot of lists where they rely on a couple dodgy aces or pieces that will soak a lot of damage. And if Sunfac is positioned right, he will just utterly annihilate those ships that aren't supposed to die and completely change your opponent's plans. So he's a high-risk ace, but has a ton of potential there. Next up, we have the Rogue, which we're seeing a lot of play in Scum. It's coming up a lot right now. But also in Separatists, Separatists have a Dirge, and that Dirge can take the Xanadu Blood title, which does allow him to take crew, which is wild. And then you get access to the Separatist crew. But one of the more interesting things about Separatist ones is they also have the droid Rogue pilots, and they have networked calculations. So you look at all the other stuff we talked about before, the Hyenas, the vultures, the Tri-Fighters that all have network calculations. You could mix in rogues and suddenly your entire list is more durable and has network calculations across the board. Now you trade that for being lower initiative, which is a bit of a bummer. But look at this guy's ability. After you perform an attack that missed, you may choose one enemy ship in your bullseye, doesn't have to be the one you shot at, and gain 1 deplete token. If you do, that ship suffers 1 damage. So you just do a damage with no defense against a ship in your bullseye. And this is where the higher ship counts is actually an advantage because you'll have a target-rich environment where there's a good chance that you can do that. You can automatically do damage to the thing that you shot at, or you can not. It's up to you. And these things have 12 loadout that does let you kind of shore up some of those weaknesses. Double cannon slot for the proton cannon. They don't have the dead to rights ability that you see on the Scum ones, but network calculations is a really interesting piece on these, and they're best flown in groups. So I mentioned you've got, 12, and then you could take 4 vultures for 8. So you could do 3 rogues plus 4 vultures for a 7-ship list. All of them have network calculations, and there's some serious punch in these guys too. So there's stuff to do. I wanted to pull this guy out because that the auto damage ability appeals to me. But let's take a real quick look at the others as well. So Dirge is a little bit different. His ability is still defensive, just like he is in Scum, but a little bit better. And then Cad's ability is very different. Instead of being able to pass a red or orange token to the target he hits, after another ship at range 0 to 3 is destroyed, you may spend 1 charge, he has 1 recurring, to perform an action even while stressed. So if you're taking a list with a bunch of weak, squishy stuff, he's really good because he can just load up on those actions where it's like, I will focus, then I'll target lock, bye. He can be incredibly powerful. And I read this and I was like, it doesn't seem that great. And then I played against it and just got my butt kicked. This CAD has a lot of potential here that I've been pretty surprised by in-game. Then we've got IG 101. This one is at the start of the system phase, you may repair 1 face-up damage card. Just bloop, flip it. And these things have 5 hull, so that's absolutely reasonable to have that trigger in multiple games. And you're just like, I don't care. I'm just going to repair that for free. Why not? Pretty good if you build that guy for durability, and there are a few upgrades you can do to make him very tanky. Then you've got IG 102. While you defend, if the attacker's initiative is equal to or greater than yours, you may change 1 blank result to an eyeball result, which works really well with network calculations. So he's initiative 4, unfortunately, so he's actually one of the higher initiative ones. But that's pretty cool. to have that ability, because if you're getting picked on by I5s and I6s, you've got a natural advantage here, which is really cool. And then you've got the Executioner, which has no ability, and then the Magna Guard Protector, which is a really interesting one. This is the 2-pip. After placing forces, assign the guarded condition to one friendly ship other than Magna Guard Protector. Now, as I recall, the guarded condition allows that ship to roll an additional green die. Let me actually look this up real quick. I got to make sure I've got that right. And make sure that I actually have it. Any second now. Sorry for the wait. And I'm assuming I actually do have it in here. Now, you know what? We're going to look this up. X-Wing guarded condition. If I can spell. Guarded. While you defend, if you are not in the attacker's bullseye, roll one additional defense die for each friendly calculating or evading Magna Guard Protector in the attack arc. So you keep these guys kind of screening one of your high-value ships, and it rolls an extra defense die. These are really handy pieces to fly with your Sun Fac to make him a little bit more durable, or your Gauntlet to just make that thing impossible to remove. So these are pretty great. Less good. So the bullseye requirement means that it's better on a smaller base ship, but it's not awful on a larger ship either. You can avoid some of those bullseyes. So really interesting one. Has lower loadout than the others by 1 point, but just enough to be a bit of an issue. It's got the same as Dirge. That's funny. But anyway, if you have not, I would definitely, as a Separatist player, take a close look at the rogues, because they're very much built into everything else with those network calculations and have some abilities that can really shore up the weaknesses in a Separatist list. And I've really been enjoying them in Scum. They're one of my mainstays now, so give it a shot. Last up, we have the Sith Infiltrator, and here we have Count Dooku from the Siege of Coruscant, so this is the quick build. So his ability says, during an attack, before a ship at range 0 to 2 rolls attack or defense dice, if all of your force are active, which is 3 on him, you may spend 1 and name a result. If the roll does not contain the named result, the ship must change 1 die to that result. So say you're taking a 3-die attack, right, at a range 2 shot. And you just say they are about to roll the attack dice. You say, wait, one of those is going to be a blank. They roll dice. If one of them is a blank, or if none of them are blanks, one of them will be. They will change it to it. It doesn't do anything if any of them already are blanks, but you just guaranteed the result. It's just like the Dooku crew ability. Having it on a ship that you can then load up the way you want to is awesome. Which, of course, this one comes in with stock. This is a quick build, so you can't actually customize it, but still, you have that pilot ability on top of the other stuff you have. Still has the title, which gives it the cloak action, which is great. And it's after placing forces, you may cloak, so you just start cloaked. After you decloak, you may choose an enemy ship in your bullseye. If you do, it gains 1 jam token. Again, no defense, no nothing, just you are jammed, which is very good because you choose to decloak in the system phase at initiative 5. So you could do it before that ship is able to act, and you can kind of plan when and where you're going to do it. And that applies later in the game too, because it's anytime you're cloaked. So if you cloak later in the game with that red cloak action, you can then use it again. He's also got Malice, which is while you perform an attack, you may spend 1 force to change one of your eyeball or hit results to a crit. So an auto eyeball mod as if it was a proton torpedo. If you do, after you perform that attack, if the defender was dealt 1 or more face-up pilot or crew damage cards, recover 2 force. So that's a way to quickly recharge the force so you can prime his ability, or just have it for later if you need it. Then he's got Roiling Anger. At the start of the engagement phase, if you are in an enemy ship's forward arc, you may gain 1 strain to recover 1 force. The strain is bad, but being able to just freely recover force is great. And if you're in that ship's firing arc, you're initiative 5, you've got 3 attack dice, there's a good chance you can really nail that ship before it gets a chance to shoot you. So that is, he's a cool ship and is seeing some play. He's 6 points, so you could save a point and run Sun Fac. Only has 1 evade die and 10 hull, but most of that is shields. 3 base attack dice. The dial is not good, but it could be a lot worse for a large base ship. So it's an interesting piece, especially adding into that the option to cloak. So you can cloak and use your decloak as an additional maneuver. It's a really interesting ship and just a cool model. I love that ship. But yeah, so kind of taking this all together, looking at all these, I think there definitely is something to a Separatist soup that we're not seeing, especially if you really lean on some of their abilities like that network calculations. If you do network calculations with a relay, it really is still good, and people aren't trying it, and people aren't playing against it, so we don't really know what's out there. And Yeah, especially the Siege of Coruscant stuff. This Coruscant stuff seems particularly unexplored, but that's me as someone who's kind of again rooting for the underdog. I'm going to touch on a couple really key upgrades, some of the ones that are unique to Separatists, especially my personal favorite, starting right here. Let's see, we're not going to do a Siege of Coruscant. Do you have? Yeah, Discord missiles. You can have, they're 3-pipped, 2 points, 2 loadout points for Discord missiles. They take a missile slot. You launch them like a bomb thrown forward. I believe they use the 3. Yeah, 3 bank right, bank left, or straight. And it's the start of the engagement phase. You can drop a calculate to throw it out there. And what they do is they stick to the front of ships, right? If it lands on a ship or if a ship flies through it, if there is the person controlling the buzz droid gets to choose if it's attached to the front guides of the ship or the rear guides of the ship. If you attach it to the front guides, that ship is guaranteed to pass through it again in the following turn, and you will have another opportunity to place them on the front guides. If there's no space on the front to place it, you can place them on the rear. But then at the end of the engagement phase, let's see, yeah. Yes, at your initiative, and these are initiative 0, I believe. At your initiative, each enemy ship at range 0 suffers 1 critical damage. And that's all of them. So so the ship it's on for sure, but then if there's another ship touching it, that also will again. So like if they're touching, but it hasn't been moved, then yeah, so it can hit multiple ships. Generally, it's going to hit the one that it's on. But you picture that on an arc 170. The last thing it wants is to just take an auto crit every single turn. You drop this on a stressed ship that can't do any of its maneuver actions to avoid it. It's really, really good. So I would personally, every Separatist list that I ran, I would start first thing with 6 points for 3 vultures with Discord missiles as a utility piece that just scares the heck out of some of these lumbering lists. Because the thing about this is, if you place it on a ship's front guides, they can shoot at it and waste an entire shot shooting this thing off, or they can ram it into another ship, which gives you the opportunity to place it again, or they can let it ride, which is a bad option. Or one of my proudest X-Wing moments ever was when I had a Ketsu. Ketsu and the Lancer had a buzz droid on the front of her, and I had Cobble, just the Y-Wing, just sweep across the front and pick that off. And then he was immediately able to barrel roll, which lets you drop off lets you remove the buzz droids, which Ketsu didn't have that option, so she would have been stuck with those for a long time. They were, what's the word? They were nerfed a little bit, where they used to have fairly significant evade and hit points, and now they're more vulnerable to bombs and they can be shot more easily, but that's still wasting a shot for 2 points. It might as well be a 2-point shield upgrade at that point on some other ship in your squad. So I think these are really, really powerful, and I think that it is absolutely worth starting a list with Discord missiles. That's me. We'll see. I mean, who knows? But that's kind of where I would start. I would go ahead and skip over the Belbalab because they're so expensive. They've got some interesting abilities, but I have never really liked them based on the cost, because you do need your Separatist list to be very, very efficient, and I don't think these have the same punch that you need or the durability you need to justify the cost. Maybe the 4-pointer Watt Tambor is an option, but he only benefits himself, and he only has 9 loadout, which is barely enough for some of the better tactical relays. So you could take Kraken as one of the best, and that's actually, so a tactical relay solitary, you can only have 1 in the entire list. Only a handful of ships have the loadout slot to take 1, but they have really powerful abilities, where Kraken is kind of the classic one. During the end phase, you may choose up to 3 friendly ships range 0 to 3. If you do, each of these ships does not remove 1 calculate token. Super powerful, just automatically keep onto your unused tokens or unused counters. Not seen very much because he's quite expensive, but still really, really good, especially if you're leaning into network calculations. You've got TA 175. This is the confetti bot. Yeah, okay. So after a friendly ship at range 0 to 3 with a calculate on its action bar is destroyed, each friendly ship at range 0 to 3 with a calculate in its action bar gains a calculate token. It's called confetti bot because you start popping vulture droids and suddenly all of them have 5 calculate tokens. Yeah, and it's not even calculate action. That's key, because if it was an action, they could only do it once. But since it just gains the token, they can do it any number of times. So you can really rack those up and make them very durable and offensively powerful, but it only triggers after they start dying, which is kind of guaranteed in this meta, so you may as well run it, but I don't know. A popular one is K2B4. This lets you turn a calculate into a straight evade. Or they can take a strain to ignore this ability. But it's really good because this isn't arc dependent. Just lets any of your ships with a calculate token just use it as if it was an evade token, which is really good. Just anytime. No limit, no nothing. So really, really good just because of how flexible it is. It's pure defense, but still very powerful. I really like TV94 in Captain Seer. So Captain Seer has that crack shot ability that he gives to any ship that does, they just get crack shot. But then TV94 is if they perform a primary attack against a defender in bullseye, which they would need to get Seer's ability anyway. If there are 2 or fewer attack dice, so vulture or hyena, it may spend 1 calculate token to add 1 hit result. I love that, to be able to turn your entire vulture swarm into throwing 3 dice, but it's very difficult to trigger because you need those bullseyes. However, the last time I tried to do it was in a meta where there were much smaller lists and a lot fewer large and medium bases. If you see arcs across from you and you're able to get some of these shots off, it adds a lot to the offensive potential of a vulture swarm. It doesn't add anything for the defense though, so that's the downside. And then another one is Kalani. After an enemy ship executes a maneuver, if it is in the bullseye of a friendly ship at range 0 to 3, you may spend 1. If you do, that friendly ship acquires a lock on that enemy ship, then gains 1 stress token. So you get a red lock that you can pull on a ship after it moves. So it opens up those secondary double mods. You have all your ships calculate, and then some of them are like, oh, free target lock, sweet. It's good. It is cheap at 3 points. TV94 and Kalani both are very tempting because of how cheap they are. TV94 especially used to be quite a bit more expensive. And those are the offensive ones. So the defensive ones are more expensive because if you're really buffing the defense of 8 ships, then yeah, you can see why that would cost more. But yeah, these are interesting. So, but those are the relays. I wouldn't necessarily run those on a Belbalab, but if you do run a Belbalab, you don't have to take, I mean, you don't do what you want. They have a mod that's Impervium Plating with 2 charges. Before you would be dealt a face-up ship damage card, you may instead spend 1 charge to discard it instead. So she's like, no, I don't want that. Really, really good. Especially powerful. And then Grievous was very popular because in addition to that, he also has access to the Soulless 1 title, which reads, while you defend, if the attacker is outside your firing arc, you may reroll 1 defense die and gets an additional 2 hull. So here's a guy who has 7 hull, twice per game can just discard a face-up crit if it's the right type, and then also can reroll defense dice, rerolling offense dice already, but rerolling defense dice if you are getting shot when you don't have a shot back. Makes it ridiculously durable. So that it's total is what? For 2 points on this thing, you get 7 hull with defensive rerolls and Beskar that's more specific but less limited. Yeah, it's pretty good. So there is that, and that is an appeal to Grievous. I think he's the only one with a title slot. I believe so. Maybe Seer. No, I think it really is just Grievous, which is unfortunate, but it makes sense. The title is supposed to be unique. Another thing I wanted to highlight while we're here, let's find someone with a talent. Of course, Grievous. Grievous has all the upgrade slots and decent amount of loadout. There are a few things I wanted to really talk about and highlight as unique to Separatists that are very powerful pieces. One of the big ones is Treacherous. This is the signature pilot talent of Separatists. Costs 3 points, but is while you defend, you may choose a ship obstructing the attack and spend 1 charge. If you do, cancel 1 hit or crit result, and the ship you chose gains 1 strain token. After a ship at range 0 to 3, recover 1 charge. So it's single use, but does recharge throughout the game, especially if you have lists where you aren't worried about losing ships, right? So yeah, if you're running a vulture swarm, that can be really good defensively. And if you're a small base ship, it's reasonably easy to get a ship obstructing some of those shots. And note, it does not say friendly or enemy. So any ship obstructing, you can sacrifice a vulture to save yourself, or you can hit an A-wing with a strain token to also save yourself a bit and then shoot at that A-wing in the follow-up. Like, it's really good. Very flexible. I particularly like it on the ships with more loadout, and especially the cheaper, more fragile ships that people don't really want to shoot at anyway. So now it's even more of a waste to shoot at them, which adds quite a bit to their durability. So if you have, and that's one reason, one of the first things that I reach for in these droids is the Kelroto AI holdouts, because they have a talent slot. 7 loadout, they have a missile on talent, so they can run Discord missiles, and they can run Treacherous, and then still have 2 points for a mod slot, which doesn't give them much, but, you know. I heard somewhere that they can't take, yeah, okay, so these don't have, unfortunately, these do not have the, God, what's the word? Network calculations ability, which cuts out a lot of the synergy, but they can take Treacherous and Discord missiles, and then just for kicks, you can give them Baffle. And then, because to take that independent calculations, you have to have network calculations as a pilot ability, and these don't. But this is a 2-point chip that gives you Discord missiles and Treacherous, where you can just apply strains willy-nilly all over the board. They're initiative 1, they're super fragile, but if you run a durable list with 3 of these, that's your max Discord missiles, you have Treacherous in there to apply strains, and they're basically objective runners that run all over the board. Like that's a really good core for a Separatist chip that you can then have a lot of extra points to play with from there. So anyway, but they lose a lot of that synergy by not having that's the trade-off, is if you get the talent slot, it has to be one of the modified for organics, and you lose that network calculations ability. So there are other places you can put that too, but that's one of the first things that I've been reaching for when I do my Separatist lists. Continuing on. So the Tri-Fighters really don't have a lot going for them. They do have... I mean, they have a lot. They should be really good, right? Because they have great stats. They're relatively cheap, but then they just struggle a bit, in part because of loadout. This thing has 4 loadout. So if you throw Treacherous on there, you have 1 left, but you can. And they also have a sensor slot, which is an interesting piece to play with. So you could have a fire control system, that's too much. New marksmanship, really mess it up. Marksmanship, fire control system, and then nothing. Do they have target locks? They do, yeah. So it's a TIE Interceptor it's a TIE Interceptor, has that target lock action stock. And they have the barrel roll to evade, which is very dodgy, and they have that boost to calculate, which is also nice. So they're cool ships, but they're challenging. I would really lean on the Tri-Fighters if you're also running a list where everything else has network calculations, so you can really build on that, and then probably bring Kraken, so you can really double down on having multiple calculate tokens, which also is important for your Discord missiles because you do have to spend a calculate to launch them. It is at the start of the engagement phase, though, so you would do that before you would have most ways that you would end up losing them. On to the fire spray. So I'm not going to talk about Django very much because it is a fire spray. There's very little in this that's unique to Separatists that we haven't already talked about. Let's take a look at the crew real quick. Oh, look, Gonk. You can take Gonk. Don't do that. Don't take Gonk. Bo-Katan, Separatist. While you perform an attack, if you're at range 0 to 1, you may reroll 1 attack die. Is an excellent piece on a ship that's going to be in the scrum. You just get a free reroll in addition to Django's base mod. She is 6 points, but he's got the loadout to do it. General Grievous Crew is a really good one too. You can build this into ships to make them stupid durable. You have defensive upgrade, General Grievous Crew, and then say Treacherous, and that thing is really, really hard to take down. Perfect kind of upgrades to put on one of these Sith Infiltrators if you want it not to die, or on a Gauntlet. While you defend after the neutralized result steps, if there are 2 or more hit or crit results, you may spend 1 charge, it has 1, to cancel 1 hit or crit result. After a friendly ship is destroyed, recover 1. So you slap this crew on pre-Vizsla in the middle of a vulture swarm, and suddenly no one is taking down that Gauntlet, and it's throwing extra dice all day long. Yeah, so there's a good one. Hondo I actually really, really enjoy, and note that the Roomba has exactly 8 points left on it. Interesting. And a crew slot. And then for the Perceptive Copilot, Pre-Vizsla Crew is while you perform a calculate or coordinate action, and it does give you a coordinate action. It's for remote, so it's only for the Mandalorian guys. Not going to talk about that. Savage is also available in Scum. 1 force charge for 10 points. But then also after a friendly ship in your forward arc at range 1 to 2 gains a stress or strain token, you may spend 1. If you do, that ship gains a focus token as well. Now that'll give it a focus token even if it doesn't have a focus action. So if you, for any reason, so this is really fun to trigger because if you have friendly ships triggering a Treacherous on each other, this can be like you just took a strain to save this ship from a hit, now have a focus, which it can use for offense or defense itself. Handy. Not going to talk about Zam. That card is way too complicated to the point where I just don't even consider it because it's not worth it. Yes, you can get double shots, but it takes 11 loadout, and it's just not worth keeping track of throughout the day. Dooku Crew does basically the same thing as the Dooku Pilot, except it's only a single force charge, so it's really easy to trigger every turn. So this is, if all of your force are active, you may spend 1 and name a result. If the roll does not contain that named result, ship must change 1 die to that result, which is super powerful. Yeah, it's good. Got Chancellor Palpatine in here. I don't remember if he's banned or not. Probably not. He's 14 points. He's a lot. Gain 1 force charge, setup, equip the side face up, so you start with this. After you defend, if the attacker is at range 0 to 2, You may spend 1 force. If you do, the attacker gains 1 stress token. So just boom, you get a stress token. And during the end phase, you may flip this card. Also has a purple coordinate, so you can spend 1 force to coordinate. So it's not a stress maneuver, which is very good, or a stress action, excuse me. And then Darth Sidious is the flip side, which is after you perform a purple purple coordinate action, there it is, the ship you coordinated gains 1 stress token. Then it gains 1 focus token or recovers 1 force. That is bananas good. You can recharge Dooku's force if you have this on another ship, and you can just give friendly ships a focus token, or it's just like, here you go, here's an action. Oh, and by the way, here's a focus token too. So it just gives you a double mod coordinate, which if you can figure out how to really benefit from that, say for example with Pre Vizsla, that's really good. Of course, you have to have a crew carrier that has 14 or more loadout. So pretty much looking at Django, and Django Pre is insanely expensive. What is that? 14 points for the 2, which still gives you 3 vultures. But so just think about that list for a second. You got an initiative 6 fire spray, and then you've got a gauntlet. It's initiative 3, but a 4 dice throwing gauntlet plus 3 vultures, just grabbing objectives and doing crazy stuff. It's a 5 ship list that benefits from ships dying. It's like, there's a lot you can do with that. Next, we've got DGS 04. We've got the Roombas. Well, let's make sure. If that was all the crew, let's take a look at the gunners. So there are Boba Fett is also in Scum, but this is just while you perform an attack. If there are no other ships in the attack arc, you may change one of your eyeball results to a hit result. If you can do bullseye attacks, like bullseye weapons only, so if you have an HLC cannon, I believe, I'm not sure if any of the rogues can do this, but if you have we'll check that in a second. But that's really good because it's the attack arc. So if you do a bullseye arc, deliberately only get 1 target, it's a free focus mod for 2 points. You got Ursa Wren. After you acquire a lock on an enemy unit beyond range 2, if there are no friendly units at range 0 to 1 of the locked unit, gain 1 calculate token. Worded that way to avoid any confusion with commandos. So you can lock and then get a calculate, so you get a force or a soft double mod. It's okay, 4 points. The range band is a little bit weird, but you have some ships that enjoy locking at long range, so yeah. And then I believe, yeah, those are the only unique Separatist gunners, which is a very short list, but there you go. And then again, I mentioned that Pre Vizsla and the Gauntlet is Mandalorian, so you can take Beskar and Optics, which are really good pieces on there. I believe Bo-Katan also has an option for the title. Yeah, she does. She can take the Gauntlet title, which gives you, well, it takes away a mod slot. But it does give you the option to repair face-up ship damage cards just during the system phase, which is really nice. And then adds an additional crew slot. So that gives you 2 crew to play with on Bo-Katan. She's only got 12 loadout, though, so that's a bummer. And it does take away a mod slot. So on the Separatist Gauntlets, you can only have either Optics or Beskar, not both. I personally would take Optics because they already have a lot of defense, but that's, you know, I'm a little bloodthirsty, it turns out. Yeah. Good. Jumping back to the Roombas real quick. And actually, Bo-Katan, before a friendly ship range 0 to 2 activates, you may spend 1 charge. If you do, that ship may gain 1 strain to remove 1 non-stress red or orange token, which is really quite good. You can just dump locks. You just dump target locks, you can dump strains, you can dump disarms if for any reason you disarmed. Yeah, can be pretty good. But, limited utility. Let's go ahead and talk about the Roomba. I know this has been going on for a long time. We'll try to keep this relatively short. We are almost done. After you perform an attack, if the defender is in your forward arc, you may acquire a lock on it, free target lock. And then if the defender is in your bullseye arc, it gains 1 strain token. Look at all this strain play. Strain. You got your Treacherous can give strains all over the place. This guy can give out free strains. There's a lot. Yeah, and then just trigger Savage all day long. This is an interesting ship, limited loadout, and only has the 2 attack dice, but it is a 180 arc, so it's got a very wide band, and networked aim. You cannot spend your locks to reroll attack dice, but while you perform an attack, you may reroll a number of attack dice up to the number of friendly locks on the defender. Now, there was a time when these first came out that I ran a list of 4 of these, and that damage output could get really scary. If all of them had target locks on an opponent, they would just be rerolling all day long, and they have missile slots. So you can put Discord missiles on these, you can put things like cluster missiles on these, and they also have the Separatist unique upgrade of energy shell charges, which requires a calculate to attack, spend 1 charge, and it only has 1. While you perform this attack, you may spend 1 calculate token to change 1 eyeball result to a crit result, which is it's a 3-die proton torpedo, which is pretty great. You only need to calculate to fire. It's a weird one, so it's 3 dice, no range bonus, range 2 to 3. It's really good for that opening, and then gives you the option to reload this card. So you don't gain the reload action, you gain the ability to reload shell charges. That does still apply the disarm token, though, so that is a bit of a bummer. But still, it's really good. Just like, here's an extra attack die. Go to town with a focus mod. Go nuts. So they are really good on vultures. They are cheap. They are cheap and don't require a target lock. They require a calculate, which you'd be doing anyway. So they're very, very good on vultures. They're okay on Roombas. Some of the Roombas also have cannon and torpedo slots, but that's why this one is 3 points. Let me see the other 3-pointer, GGS286. You can just steal calculate tokens and has missile slots. Okay, so the 3-pointers aren't the ones with cannons. The Onderon Oppressor is the cannon one, which is 4 points, but it can take... No, not even that one, which is the... One of these has double... wow, double cannon slots. The Geonosian prototype can take synced cannons. Or proton cannons if you want to. Which actually, it's pretty easy for these things to line up bullseyes because of their side-flipping jankiness. And then they have that networked aim where they're very good at re-rolling a couple dice. Yeah, they're pretty good. But you can also just give them synced laser cannons, be like you're a 3 attack die ship now. And since they have calculate and are calculated most of the time, they actually benefit from that secondary ability if you are calculating the defender does not apply the range bonus. So there's all that. You may notice the trend is low initiative. One of the first things I would be tempted to drop on Django is Squad Leader. No, Swarm Tactics. So you can choose another friendly ship and make it initiative 6. And there are a lot of reasons to do that. A lot of abilities we've seen that are after an attack, and he's able to really add that up. So like the Rogue Class Fighter, for example, that after it attacks, it can do a free damage, is really good if you can shoot it at initiative 6. Yes. So the biggest reason you take Roombas is they're pretty good on objectives. They are cheap and durable, the 3-pointers in particular, and then also they can take relays and or crew. So they're really good crew carriers and really good relay carriers. At 8, you can just slap Kraken on one of these and just call it your 3-point, like, mess around ship. That's probably one of the better builds for these, just to kind of keep them functional for the rest of your squad without over-investing too much. Because it's a 3-point ship to carry a relay, where previously you'd have to spend at least 4, more like 5, to take one of the Belba Labs, or even more to take a Sith Infiltrator. These don't lose as much by spending all of their loadout on a relay, so it's definitely a point for taking them. We talked about the Hyena. That's kind of the same thing as the Vulture, but one of the more effective Hyenas is the Bombardment Drone. 3-pipped, Bombardment Drone is famous for being able to throw bombs. If you would drop a device, you may launch that device instead using the same template, which basically always just means a 1-straight. But they do still have the loadout to take cluster missiles or an electroproton bomb, which we saw at some tournament recently. So you can bring an electroproton bomb, which was introduced, I believe, with the Vulture, intended to be used with these. Or you can do cluster mines with a... They have a mod slot? They do. So you could do cluster mines and delayed fuses, so that they don't go off right away, or you can just drop any number of bombs. They're quite good with concussion bombs and delayed fuses. Drop those forward and then boogie. Yeah, they also have network calculations to show those calculate tokens. They're interesting pieces. The bombardment drone is 3 points. They're one of the cheaper hyenas. The hyenas are mostly 4. Excuse me, the hyenas, well, a couple of them. The hyenas are mostly 3. Yeah, they are interesting pieces. Anyway, but since they're 3, the biggest thing they offer is just they are vultures with more hull. More than almost double the hull, and quite a bit more loadout. So that you can build them out in a bunch of different ways, but they're, basically vultures, but with higher initiative, more loadout, and more hull. So they cost more. This is the Siege of Coruscant? No. So, but this one is 9 loadout and a sensor slot. It's a really interesting piece. So you can do passive sensors. Passive sensors on initiative 1 is good. Just letting you choose to act after other ships have moved, but yeah. Then we talked about the Nantex, we talked about Ensnare. I also really like these guys with Treacherous because it is another way to give them the extra defensive benefit. And then I believe I usually drop in Electronic Baffle. Not the best upgrade, but in case you really, really need to get out of dodge, it's a good piece. And now most people choose this thing kind of thinking of it as stapled with Ensnare. Instead of ensnare, you can always go with afterburners and then still have some. It looks like you've got 2 extra points to play with if you do afterburners and treacherous. Initiative 6, afterburners is good. It's got a bullseye arc that you don't want to rotate the turret, but you can sometimes, because at initiative 6, you can actually do that tractor thing. Yeah, so after you fully execute a maneuver, so you can't bump. It used to be you could bump and then do it, but still, it's a free barrel roll. So you can, what is this? Afterburners after. Yeah, okay. So you do a fast maneuver, you focus, let's see, you do a fast maneuver like a 3-speed or faster, then you get the free boost from afterburners. And then you can choose, so you can do the pinpoint tractor array before or after afterburner. So that is important to note. So you could either boost first, or you could use the tractor beam barrel roll first. And that does also include a rotate. I want to remind you again, is you can tractor yourself, rotate your arc, move yourself, and then rotate your whole ship, and then you can boost with afterburner. So this does make it a bananas ace if you do the afterburners on Sunfac. You lose the option to give away your tractor token, so it's more risky, but it gives you just completely insane maneuverability, which with a bullseye weapon and a initiative 6 is pretty great. So yeah, there are some alternative builds to that. I know that people basically don't leave home without ensnare, which lets you pass off the tractor token, but consider the options you can do without that. And then you have, what, another 2 points? We could do a marksmanship, or we could do, it has 3 talent slots. I think it's the only ship in the game with 3 talent slots. But just think about what crazy combinations you can do with initiative 6 and 3 talent slots. One of my personal favorites is marksmanship and Deadeye Shot. Now, Deadeye Shot is a weird one where it lets you, after you roll your dice, you can spend a hit, so just turn a hit to a blank or turn a crit to a hit to expose one of the defender's damage cards. The reason you would do that is you roll a god-awful attack. Oh, and he still has 2 points to spend. Wow, he's got a bunch of hit. What can we do instead of Treacherous for 5 points? Let's remove that. Yeah, we still have 5 points. Wow. You know, let's mess with this. We're going to do the 5. We got Enduring, tempting. Swarm Tactics. Ooh, there it is. Yeah. So you can have one of your other ships shoot initiative 6. Boom, done. Yeah, gave up the defensive abilities completely, but you know what? Roll with it. Choose violence. And that will make some of your other offense much more aggressive. So I really like that build. Yeah. That's pretty great. So anyway, I was talking about Deadeye Shot. So I actually really like this one, where say you're shooting at a TIE fighter, right? It's got 3 evade and a focus. It's at range 3, but it's got 2 damage cards. You shoot at it, you're basically guaranteed to miss, but if you land a single hit, you can say like, hey, that hit is now a crit. What is it? And then it could suffer a crit, could be a direct hit, and just kill it outright. There's a lot of utility in that for 1 point, especially if you can guarantee a crit. Oh, look, marksmanship. Yes, so then you have the potential to hit with the hits, but then also get the automatic card flip from that crit. Really good against ships with a lot of hit points, so they have a bunch of damage cards, or those weaker or those smaller ships that you want to deal that extra damage through too. And if you can take both of those in combo, I'm all about it. Anyway, that is a very weird Sunfac build, but yeah, give it a try. We already talked about the rogues in some detail. They don't really have any unique upgrades that I would consider here, but let's look at Dirge, because he can take the title, which also opens up the option of a crew slot. Yeah, there we go. He's also got Django, but it's not great. What can you do? You can slap General Grievous crew on here, and then he has General Grievous, proton cannons. And then we got proton. I love proton cannons on Dirge and Scum. Been loving that. And this is a very durable Dirge, especially with Grievous. You combine Grievous with his ability, it's just like you're never going to kill this ship. So there, you know what? You need a ship to tank some hits. There's your ship. I wish there were points for Treacherous, and there are, but you have to give up all your offensive output by losing the proton cannon. So, and then we've got Dooku. The other infiltrators are interesting. I'm not going to talk too much about them. Maul, of course, is basically never used, but he is, after you perform an attack, you may spend 2 force to perform a bonus primary attack. Think of this guy in a squad where you're somehow able to load in Sidious Crew, which of course is what it was combined for. You coordinate this guy into some bonus. You can then either, so you can be target lock, gain a focus token, or target lock, gain a force back so you can get his bonus shot. Of course, they're meant to fly together and do very well flying together, so that is definitely a thing. He's 7 points on a 1 evade ship, so yeah, he can take the title and has a bunch of loadout slots, but yeah. Another thing I do want to highlight on him is you may spend 2 to form a bonus primary, but the attack first, so you can shoot with a cannon or a torpedo, and then follow up with a primary attack. So your first attack doesn't have to be a cannon or a torpedo. I don't believe he has a gunner slot, which is a bummer because I would love to slap Boba Fett crew on there, so you get the passive mod to both of those shots, but you can't do that, so yeah. Yeah, he does, however, have heightened perception. So you can shoot twice at initiative 7. Yeah. One of the rare ships that can, one of the only ships in the game, I think, that can shoot 2 shots at initiative 7, because that's, I think, the only way you can get bonus shots. Yeah, maybe a Bistan thing in Rebels, but I don't think so, because you'd need the weird turret arc, and Force and turret is pretty rare. I think Leia can do it, but it's not great. But anyway, Darth Maul is a really good one for heightened perception. That was it. I've gone way too long. That is our Separatist breakdown. Not going to cover any squads. I just wanted to kind of do a sort of bash brainstorming session on the thing. Favorite things we talked about, of course, are going to be your Discord missiles. I really like Pre-Vizsla, and I really like this build on Sun Fac. I got to try that because that's a good time. Yeah, hopefully this is helpful. Give something a try. See you out there.